So it's a new year, and I thought today I would do something a little different and talk about photo editing. We talk a lot on this channel about gear and taking the images and what lenses are better, but really something that's just as important as being able to take the photos is being able to edit them. There are a few basic things that you need to know how to do, and you have to remember to do it with every image, just to make sure that you have a good starting point. This is not going to be a detailed how to edit every type of picture thing, but this is if you're new to photography, or even if you've been photo editing, maybe these are some things that you don't think about all the time. And just wanted to give you some tips and some things that you really should do every single time you open up an image in your photo editing program. And also, that's another thing. If you're not editing your photos, you really should be. It's really where the creativity comes out. Getting your image right in camera and getting this great shot is wonderful. But when you get it into the computer is where you can really make it your own and give it a look that you want, and you can manipulate the photos. So that's something that's very important as a photographer to be able to do. And going along with that, to get the most out of the images that you're editing, you want to shoot in RAW mode on your camera. And that's the first thing I'm going to talk about. It's not an editing tip per se, but to get the most out of your images, shoot in RAW. And what is RAW? That's the picture quality that you have your camera set to. Shooting in RAW is going to give you the most information to work with when you're editing your photos. So you'll be able to adjust things like the shadows and the highlights and the colors and the exposure, and you'll be less limited than if you were shooting in JPEG. So that's the first thing that you're going to want to do. And you go into your camera settings, and it's something you'll be able to find. Almost any DSLR or mirrorless camera will have this setting inside of it, and it's something that you should set your camera to. Now, when you shoot in RAW, you're going to have to edit your images. So it's going to make more work for you on one end, where the camera's not processing the images for you like it will with a JPEG, but it's going to teach you how to edit your images. You're going to be left with what the camera saw, and then you're going to be able to take over and make the images the way you want. So the next thing is you want to level your images. You want to make sure everything is level. So if you have any kind of horizontal line going across the images, you want to make sure it's straight. So let's go into Lightroom here and level an image I took of a sunrise in South Carolina. I've opened up my crop tool, which is up here, and I'm going to grab the leveling tool, and I'm going to drop it here. And across over here. And that looks pretty good. Now, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is not only do you want to level an image. Now, this is just a horizon line. Once that's straight, you're good. So in this image here, we had the horizon line on the beach, but this one is a shot of the city. And it's buildings, and there's a bridge in the background. And while it looks level enough, you have the buildings falling away. So there's a tool in Lightroom that helps you correct for this. Now, what I like to do is I usually just click the auto button and see what Lightroom does. And right there, it actually cleaned up the image real nice. Now, just another thing about the transform tool I was talking about. Some images are okay to leave looking a little wonky. Now, here's an image I took of Times Square in New York City. And if you look at this, if I tried to correct this, I shot this with a fisheye lens. And, it's supposed to look a little wonky, and that's what I was going for. I wanted it to be, different looking. I wanted the buildings to bend in, and I wanted to have that fisheye look in there. So let's see what happens if we use the transform tool here. It really doesn't do much. I still have the bent lines. I still have everything, and Lightroom has a hard time with this. So sometimes it's okay to leave things looking a little skew if that's what you're going for. It's okay to leave buildings falling off or coming in if that's what you want. But just know that the tool is in there, and if you're shooting pictures on the wall, or there's maybe some furniture in a real estate photo, those are images you want to get all your lines square, and Lightroom has the tools to do it. Now, there's some things in this image that I don't love, and that's going to bring me to the next thing that I'm going to talk about here, and that's cropping. Cropping is something that I think every photographer should do in their images. It's not some thing that you shouldn't do. I've heard YouTubers say you should get everything right in camera, and you don't want to crop. You don't want to lose the resolution that your sensor has. Today's sensors have so much detail in them that I crop almost every image I take, and sometimes I crop them quite a lot. especially if you're not going to print it, then just create what you want. And a lot of times there's an image inside an image that's a lot better than the one that the camera actually caught. Maybe you couldn't get close enough to your subject. Maybe there was just some reason you had the wrong lens, or you wanted to use a telephoto, but all you had with you was a 50 millimeter and you couldn't get tight enough. Crop your images. Make the image that you want. I'm going to open up the crop tool, and I'm going to just draw the image that I think I want. Now, I think this image works better this way. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, I prefer that. That's an image to me that I think looks better. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if I was going to blow this up into a huge image, maybe I'd run into an issue with the resolution, but I'm not. And I've printed images this size where I've cropped in about that much, and I've had no issues with anything. Again, with the cropping, here's another image that I really love. It's a picture of the Statue of Liberty, but here's just a quick, this is how much I cropped on this one. Okay, I was in New Jersey across the river, and I could not get any closer. I shot this with my 70 to 200 lens, and this is as close in as I could get. So I was at 200 millimeters, and this is where I'm at. So I had to crop in to create the image I wanted, and I actually like the way that looks. And then I desaturated everything around it with some other tools in Lightroom, but I created a pretty cool image for what I thought was an image that was almost unusable. One of the other things before you start really editing your picture that you should do at the beginning of your edit is to get the white balance right. So white balance is the color temperature in your image. So I have an image here of my two daughters that I shot for a Christmas card picture, and the white balance is off in this image. And if you look at it, you can see their skin tone's a little blue. So when I open the basic panel, if I move the white balance slider, you can see what happens to their skin. It gets even bluer. If I go this way, it gets more warm. And then underneath that is the tint slider. Now you can use this in any image. If you wanted to warm up a landscape photo, raise the white balance a little bit, create a little more warmth in an image. Maybe you have a dark, gritty image of a city scene or something like that, and you want to kind of make it cool and almost sad looking. Make it a little cooler, colder, bring it down. So to get the white balance right in an image like this, I would take the eyedropper tool and I'd look for something either white or gray in the image. So I'm going to look at my daughter's sweater here. That looks like a pretty gray area. And it warmed up the image nicely. Now I can go over here and tweak it a little bit, but what it did was, not only did it add a little warmth to the image, it also added a little magenta tint to it. So it actually warmed it up and made the skin tones a little darker, and it makes it look really nice. So that's something you don't want to do with all of your images, especially of people. You don't want skin tones to look blue because it's not natural. You always want to be on the warm side of things when you're working with skin tones. Now, you also want to work with the white balance in your landscape images. And this is something that's super important because it's going to affect the whole overall mood of any image. Now, when I took this image here that I'm going to show you, it did not look like this. So if I show you the before and after, you can see it was a much cooler image on the left-hand side, and I warmed it up on the right-hand side. If you look over here, I cranked the white balance all the way up. Now, if I bring it back down, you can see it totally changes the whole mood and vibe of this image. It cools it off. It almost makes it look like a winter scene. So as I go to the right, it warms up the image. And really, this is up to you. This is where you can get creative. You do whatever you want here. I like it right there. And I also added a little burst of sunlight in the top part of this image, and I did that with a radial filter. So basically, it's the same thing. It's using the white balance, but also in a localized manner. So when I click on this, you can see I raised the exposure and I took the white balance all the way up in this one spot. And you can see if I take it down, it cools off that little hot spot that I wanted to look like the sun. When I move it to the right, it looks like the sun might be in the background there setting. So you can use white balance to really change the mood of your image, different parts of your image. You can do it locally, globally. So that's why learning a program like Lightroom is really important, and just making these few simple edits at the very beginning before you start going crazy with your images are going to help you get the mood and the tone right and make sure everything's straight and everything looks the way you want it to. So those are just a few things that when you're first getting your images into the computer and you start editing one that you might want to do. Shoot in RAW to get the most amount of information to work with. Crop your images. Don't be afraid. Get in there and create the image you want from the image that you shot. Make sure your horizon lines are straight, because that's one of those simple things that just doesn't look right to the viewer. If your horizon lines are off just a little bit, it's something that you pick up. People pick that up when they look at an image. So you want to make that sure that's straight. That's one of the first things you always do, especially if there's an actual horizon in it. But if there's any kind of level surface that kind of looks like a horizon, or any straight lines, you want to get those looking the way they should, so it's not a distraction to the viewer. And then you're going to want to fix the perspectives that that you have in your image also, especially when you're shooting interiors, real estate photography, architectural photography, unless you're trying to create a certain look. But there are tools in Lightroom where you can move things around to get it the way you want it to look. But if you're shooting, buildings and interiors, or you're shooting images of something where there's a lot of square lines, you want them to kind of all line up, and it gives the image a little bit of a better look, and it's not so distracting. And then you want to get your white balance right. Your colors need to be right in your images. Now, there are times when you can push and pull them one way or the other, but you want skin tones to look natural. Remember, warmer tones are going to give a more pleasant feeling to the image. It's going to create like this, almost like a happy vibe in the image, a summery type of vibe, where going the other way with the white balance, more towards the blues, is going to give a sadder, cooler, just a more colder look, really. That's what it is. I'm going to put our Lightroom playlist here, and go through these videos if you don't know how to use Lightroom, or you don't even have it yet. It's a program we both use and recommend, and we have a bunch of videos in here that'll actually take you through downloading it up to using the various tools that are inside there. Okay, see you in the next one.